there, friends and sane persons. It's Wednesday. I'm Kyle, and you are watching another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. We're getting near the end of 2022, and I recently received a new game that kind of exploded onto my table, and a game I spent a lot of time playing and figuring out, and that's the game I'm here to talk to you about today. This is a tiny game and a sequel to a game I really love. This game is, there's the glare there, One Deck Galaxy. Now, One Deck Galaxy is, of course, the sequel to One Deck Dungeon. It is not compatible with One Deck Dungeon, but it has a lot of the same sort of core ideas that are going about in it. And it's a game that's played with a deck of cards plus some extra things. I guess let's say it like that. So, excuse me, we're going to talk about it here. Sorry, I need to get a drink. Excuse me. We're going to talk about it here, and I'll tell you what it's about and what I think about it. So, what is it about? One Deck Dungeon is about you're a galactic race. You're some galactic federation. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. And you are trying to build up your federation, develop your technologies and resources and colonies, and fight against some cosmic threat. The cosmic threats are, and we'll talk about this when we get there, kind of amorphous things. There's one that's a supercomputer. There's a couple that seem to be clouds. And then there's one that's like a dark race that's conducting all kinds of weird experiments. And you are trying to best them at their own game through the use of dice rolling and some card play, sort of. That's kind of what it is. You're going to play for, the game's actually a little longer than you would think. It looks for this box, you'd think it would be 20 minutes. It's closer to, the box says 45 minutes to an hour. And actually, I think that's about right. It's definitely north of 30 minutes. South, I don't know which way that would be. It's longer than 30 minutes. It's usually less than an hour. But really, that's what you're doing. You're sort of developing your nation and eventually trying to figure out how best to best this cosmic adversary. So let's take a look at some pictures of the game. I can show you some things here if there aren't very good pictures, of course, but let's see what we can find here. So in the game, and let's talk. Sorry, I'm having all kinds of technical difficulties today. First choking to death, and now not being able to show my screen. There we go. That's better. All right. So here is the game. And let's talk very briefly about how it works. So the heart of the game is going to be your adversary. You can see the adversary right up here. This is the Nibelwuber colony, which is the one that is sort of recommended for your first play. The Nibelwuber colony has various resources that it is using, but the core thing that it's using, it looks like they're doing this incorrectly, is it's gaining these influence. So this deck of cards can be used as influence, and that's going to be 1 or 2 influence, and it's going to be used to track progress in a variety of ways. And actually, this is a game of multi-use cards. You've got one use there, and then once you flip the card over, it has other uses. So on your turn, you're going to deal with some upkeep with the adversary. It's going to progress its power, and when it gets to a certain power level, it's going to act in some way, usually. And then you're going to make a galaxy of 4 cards. And it looks like they didn't do that correctly here. But the cards are going to be they're either going to be locations, or I think they're called encounters. So this one here, this is a location. And what it's the blue card. So you're going to roll a certain number of dice. And the number of dice you're going to roll is going to depend on your federation. You'll see over here, this one is going to be rolling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yellow dice, 6 blue dice, and 2 pink dice. And then you're going to be using these dice to try and fill in certain cards. So, for example, you need to put a 6 here, a yellow 6, and then in this box, you need to put any number of dice. They have to be pink, but you can put as many dice as it takes to get to 19 or more. Then at the end of the round, each of these is going to be activated. So if you have if you've put the yellow 6 here, you're going to get 1 influence. You'll tuck a card up there. And if you've put enough to get 19 in this pink box, you'll get to put 3 influence. So that makes it to a total of 4. What do you use the influence for? Well, as soon as the influence threshold of the card has been met, you're going to claim that card. In this case, as soon as there's 8 influence there, you're going to claim it, and you can either put it under your board to give you access to more dice and these star tokens, or you can put it under your board and activate this this special ability. These star tokens, those represent technology tokens, and you can spend them on your turn to activate the different technologies you have. So the more that you have, the more technologies you can activate. These dice that it gives you, well, those are going to be the resources you're going to use to interact with other cards. So having both is great. Now there's another kind of card, and I guess it's not showing in this picture, but it's I think called an encounter, and this looks like a prototype. And the encounter looks exactly the same as this location, except that the encounter is going to, you have to complete it all in one turn. Now, normally the dice, like if I put only 18 pink here, they're going to be wasted because they'll be cleared off at the end of the turn, but I can kind of build this thing up over time. The encounter, you have to kill it all at once. And so you're going to need to do that. And if every turn you don't, it's going to tick an influence up. And when it gets to a certain threshold, which is usually 3, it's going to leave, but it's going to cause your adversary to activate something instead. So, like, each one has a different set of rules when they activate. So you're going to be doing that. And there's also this ship, your starship you can upgrade, and that gives you access to different other features. You can get spaceships, starfighters that you're going to use to activate certain events, and you're going to get research, and the research you're going to use to upgrade your starship or to pay for other things that you want to do. You can buy these black wild dice with resources. Anyway, you're going to do that on repeat. Now, every time you get to the bottom of your deck, every time you're getting influence or using a card for anything, it's going out of the deck. And once you get to the end of the deck, then there's an adversary event that's going to come into play. And there are usually 5, there's 5 of those for each adversary, I believe. And then it's going to do some terrible thing. Now, how do you win or lose? Well, you're going to win by defeating the adversary. Each adversary has a card that's going to tell you what you have to do to beat it. For example, for level 1, it looks like I've got to put a yellow 5 and a blue 5 and spend 6 spaceships. And then there's a level 2, a 3, and a 4. Once you complete level 4, you win. Each time you complete it, you're going to remove one of these tokens. Now, you can't do level 2 until you've built your Federation up to level 2. And so you see you've got your own special character here. And this is definitely a prototype. Your special character has certain goals. Like this one wants to have 10 spaceships and 10 research, which I think has been changed. Anyway. Or wants to have different symbols, etc. And as soon as you complete them, you're going to move one of these tokens over into that box to show it's completed, and that increases your Federation level, which lets you then attack the adversary the second, third, or fourth time. You're going to do this until you win. Or the adversary, each one's going to have its own overwhelm effect. That's what it's called when they beat you. And as soon as you are overwhelmed, you lose, unless you're able to spend one of those adversary tokens that you get when you attack it. You can spend that to delay your loss by 1 turn. But you're going to do this until one of the win or loss conditions is met. There's a variety of different cards you're going to go through. There's a variety of different characters you can use. Each game you're going to use a nation and a federation, or I don't know what they're called, but you're going to put 2 cards together to give you a combination of special abilities and goals that you're going for. And yeah, you're going to do that, and you're going to win or lose. And that's kind of how it works. It's a lot of random dice placement, but there's also a lot of powers you can use to manipulate the dice. So let's talk briefly about some things that I find special about the game. All right, the first thing I find special about this game is this is a solo first design. This game is, well, technically playable by up to 2 players, but it's designed as a solo game. It's designed to enable you to have a great, interesting solo experience where you've got a little rolling of dice, manipulating dice, and a lot of little nice hits as the game goes by, as you're kind of solving things and getting things to work for you. Definitely a fantastic solo experience. Another thing that's special is that there are 5 different adversaries, and they all play very differently. I've played against all 5, uh, and even though you're doing the same sort of general motions, the way that you're going to fight each one is going to be different each time. Some of them are harder, some of them are easier, and actually each one has an easy and a hard side. There's also a campaign, which I haven't played, so I won't speak to it, but it looks like when you play it, you're going to go through these campaign sheets, and as you sort of achieve different things, you're going to get different bonuses that you can then use in later iterations of the game. You've also got a lot of variety, not as much as I would like, but I'll talk about that later, in the different characters you can use. Each time you're going to combine the 2 character sheets, and you've got one character sheet. Each one gives you a technology, a special ability you can use, and a different goal you're working toward. So it's really interesting to sort of see what combinations you can get. There's, I think, 5 of each. So, you can kind of figure out what the number of combinations there are with that. But it's a lot of variety in the game. The rules are not hard once you learn them. We'll talk about the rule book in a minute. It's also very portable. I mean, this is the whole box. I will say that this is sort of deceiving because it does take up a lot of table space once you set up all the different piles. But it's very easy to travel with just because it's so small. I know One Deck Dungeon, its predecessor, is very travelable because I've traveled with it many times. It's one of my go-to travel games. I believe I talked about it on my travel games list. And this one has all of those same aspects that made One Deck Dungeon just a great travel game as well. Let's see, anything else? There's pretty good artwork. The characters kind of feel unique. There's one character that's like a beet. I see. I can show you some here. Like there's this robot guy, and there's this cat lady. There's the beet. It's the Plum Plim character, and he's got his little bees. They're kind of fun characters. I mentioned the adversaries. They're kind of like nebulous type things. We've got a Hungry Nebula. We've got the Neeblewoobers. We've got the Preservation Authority, which also just kind of looks nebulous. And then we have the Dark Syndicate, which is another nebula. So there's a lot of nebulae that you're fighting against. More on that in a moment. But yeah, there's a lot of different characters. Also, the icons are very easy to read. All of the special abilities are pretty clear. I think the only ones that aren't are explained. It's just a very easy game once you've learned it to kind of jump in and play. It's also, I won't say it's a little long, but for a solo game, the setup is really easy. And then, you've got a nice solo experience out of a fairly reasonable setup. So those are some things. Oh, and also it's a lot of fun. That's another thing that's special about it. So where's the but? This game is not perfect, okay? And I will, in the final thoughts, I'll compare it to One Deck Dungeon. But there's a couple of problems in the game. The first problem is the rule book. There are 2 rule books, and both of them forgot a rule. There's a rule that's just not explained, and that is this probe rule, which is very key. It is explained on their website. You can easily go and find it, but it's such an important part of the game that not having it explained in the rule book was really very unfortunate. It's also a little tough to learn to play the game from reading the rules. I had a bit of a hard time when I was doing that. I mean, again, not the end of the world, but I wish the rules had been a little bit more user-friendly. I also wish there were a player aid. Each of these characters, each of the bad guys has a kind of a player aid on the bottom. It's got a little sort of a turn phase summary, but it doesn't actually explain what happens in those turn phases. So that's kind of, I don't know. That seems like an obvious oversight. Just a one card summary would have been a pretty good thing to add. Another thing, and this is probably my biggest knock against the game. Well, my second biggest. My biggest we'll talk about last. But the second biggest is that although there are a lot of characters, there really aren't. I mean, the bad guys just kind of feel like space clouds. All of them, I always feel like I'm fighting a space cloud. Not once do we have some scary looking alien pictured. It's always, some sort of nebula. And I don't know. I mean, one deck dungeon, your bad guys were a dragon or a minotaur or some sort of character that you could feel like you were fighting. There's a phoenix. There's, a lot of different things that you could fight, and you really felt like you were fighting something. Here, you kind of feel like you're interfering with a nebula. And that's just not quite as good. Also, there's 5 different adversaries. There probably need to be 10. Even though they're different, because it's a solo game, it's the kind of game you're going to play again and again and again. And so you'll become very familiar with the 5 different options very quickly. Also, there's only 5 of the different characters. Again, there probably need to be 10. Now, that's something an expansion will definitely solve, so I'm not going to hold that against the game right now. But it's something that I wish had been already there, especially as long as this game's been in development. And then the final thing, and that is the biggest knock against the game, is it is incredibly fiddly. Like every turn, you're taking cards and tucking them under here, taking them out of here, taking them out and flipping them around. You're just always managing these cards. You're always tucking, untucking. I'm sounding like I'm on Drag Race. The cards are a very nice plastic. And I actually like plastic cards, and they're not actually the kind that slip around. They're a very good quality plastic card, but it's just you're constantly doing something. There's never a turn. The fun part of the game is where you roll the dice and figure out where to put them. The not fun part is, okay, I've got to tuck an influence under here. I've got to, let's see, I'm adding 4. There's already 1 there, so I've got to pull 1 out, flip it around, and then put another 1 in. It's incredibly, there's just so much handling between your actual fun turns, and it gets a little tedious. So that's probably my biggest negative about the game. Now, with that negative, you might think I didn't like it, and that is an incorrect statement. I really like this game. I'm going to start by comparing it with One Deck Dungeon. One Deck Dungeon has a very similar mechanism, except in One Deck Dungeon, you're going to go through 3 times through the deck, and then ready or not, the big bad is there. And then you fight the big bad, and it kind of works the same way as any other round of the game. There's more spots to cover, and it might do you more damage, and then you win or lose. In this one, it's a little bit more slow. You're never actually fighting the enemy. You're just kind of, when you're ready to, you can put dice on its card and kind of clear to the next level. And if you ratchet it up a 4th time, you win. But you never really feel like you're coming to a confrontation. You're more interfering with its plans, and it's interfering with yours. But One Deck Dungeon tends to move a little faster because of that, because every turn is largely the same. You're just choosing a different option. Whereas in this one, it's like, I really just don't know how to describe it, but it's not as straightforward. And I think I prefer the sort of direct kick down the door and go fight the monster of One Deck Dungeon to the more subtle manipulation and figuring out how to do things. Like a big part of Galaxy is figuring out how to unlock your 4 Federation special abilities, because you have to do at least 3 of them. And so a lot of the game is you're saying, okay, and I guess this is almost a negative. in One Deck Dungeon, you really had a little bit more flexibility. Every time you beat something, you really had a choice. Do I want to put it in for its for the dice it's going to give me, or do I want to keep it for its special ability? Here you have that choice, but it's often illusory because depending on which goal you have, which character you have, you might need to focus on getting dice, or you might need to focus on getting special abilities, and that kind of removes the choice. You're like, well, okay, I could choose it, but I really need to take it for whichever kind of pre-programmed role I have, and I find that to be a little bit less flexible. So, in terms of rules, they're about the same. This one has a little bit more rules, but I think honestly, I like One Deck Dungeon a little bit better. And that's going to be reflected in my rating. One Deck Dungeon also has an expansion, or two actually, I think, and a bunch of promo characters, so there's a larger roster of things to play with. I'm not going to hold that one against Galaxy yet because it's brand new. But One Deck Dungeon, I give a perfect 10. I mean, it is one of my favorite games of all time, hands down. And this game, I debated whether it deserved a 10, but I think because of some of its problems, I'm going to put it down at a 9 for now. And the way I say that, it makes it sound like that's a bad thing. No, it's 9 out of 10. It's a fantastic game. If you like solo games, this is definitely one you should look into. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of randomness because it's, dice and cards. but it's a really fun kind of randomness. And as a solo romp, it's just really a lot of fun. It's not as good as its predecessor, but, rarely are things, right? But still, even if it's not a perfect 10 yet, it might eventually get there. And I definitely think this is one that you're going to like. I wish there were an app. There's a fantastic app for Dungeon. But this one is brand new. Anyway, so if you like solo games, this is definitely one to go for you. The box says you can play with 2. I've played Dungeon with 2, and it was just okay. Basically, it kind of feels like you're splitting one character into 2. You've got kind of half the dice and half the special abilities. And it's okay, but it was designed for one. And Galaxy, I'm assuming, would be the same. And then there's some ludicrous optional rules. If you want to buy 2 boxes, you can play as a 4-player game. That's madness. Go play something else. If you've got 4 people, don't try and expand the solo game to fit for 4. But anyway, it's definitely one more complicated than Dungeon. I will say start with One Deck Dungeon, or better yet, start with its app. and then kind of go from there. But if you enjoy One Deck Dungeon, or you enjoy kind of puzzly dice rolling solo games, this is great. If you're looking for something light and small, well, not light, physically light, that you can take with you on a trip, One Deck Galaxy also won't disappoint. It is definitely an excellent game, 9 out of 10, and one that I highly recommend, even though I said some bad things about it. Anyway, that's one of Wednesday Whimsy. I hope you have enjoyed kind of listening to me ramble about One Deck Dungeon. That was kind of a rambly one, but I have weird feelings about the game. I've sure been playing it a lot, though. As soon as it came, I got it right out, and I've just been playing a lot of it and having a lot of fun with it. Anyway, I'm going to end this here, and I will be back in a week for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy, where I'm going to be talking about another new game, and that game is, it's going to be revealed next week. Actually, it's Great Western Trail, Argentina. But I will talk about that next week. And with that, I will wish you safe travels, courage when you need it, and I will see you on another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.